Hi, everyone. This is Lin Bouthillier from linbouthillier.com. I'm a certified trauma recovery coach, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of, actually, it's part 2 of the previous episode in my series entitled Monogamous at 13. The series is this is a 2-part episode in a series about trauma. And I use myself as a case study, and I bring my point of view, which is 2 separate point of views. One as a trauma survivor, because I am a complex trauma survivor, and the other view is as a mental health professional who specializes in trauma. So I have my grounding tool in my hand. I feel all ready to start, except for one small thing. I'm going to pause for 1 second. Sorry about that. I realized I was way too warm. Okay, so this is part 2 to the episode about the effects that childhood pornography exposure. I'll put it a different way. Children who are exposed to pornography in early childhood, middle childhood, and early adolescence. This is a problem for many people. I can't say that for every single person that is exposed to that it is a problem, but I wanted to do an episode about it because in part 1 of this episode, I explain that I was in a relationship with a person who did experience significant exposure in early childhood, or in childhood, I should say, to pornography. I can't accurately determine whether or not there was exposure in early childhood. And when I checked with that individual, they couldn't verify it either way, if it started, at age 4, 5, 6, around there. But he was at a house when he was 9 years old and experiencing pornography at his aunt and uncle's house, just 6 doors down on the same side of the street, that his 3 younger cousins, who would have to have been between the ages of 5 and 8 at that time, were also, it was their house, it was their basement, it was the box that belonged to their parents that was in their basement. And I was told there might have even been multiple boxes. The memory wasn't super clear on that, but what was a clear memory for this individual that I'm speaking about is, and I ended up in a relationship with them, the relationship, friendship began at age 12, and then months later, when we turned 13 in that same 8th grade year, we were in a relationship, and it turned into, almost immediately, it turned into a relationship with unwanted sexual contact. I was the person who was saying no, and that individual was saying, oh yeah. And I'll pause here for a moment to explain this. This is what prompted me to do this discussion in the first place, is that I became aware much later on in my adult years that the response to me saying no to sexual contact at school was completely and utterly unacceptable. It was not healthy. It was not what we would consider to be a what we would call a typical school day situation for a 13-year-old child. And a 13-year-old is a child. And I don't know of any state in the entire United States of America, which is a country where I live in, obviously, where sexual contact of any kind is something that a 13-year-old can consent to. In the state where I live, you must be 17 years old to consent to sexual contact. And if you are 1 day shy of turning 17 years old, it's a crime. And if you are 17 years old and you consented, then it's not. But it doesn't matter if you're 17 years old and, well, I shouldn't say it doesn't matter, but if you're 17 years old and it's non-consensual, same as if you're 65 years old. If it's non-consensual, then it's sexual assault. If someone touches you after you say no, then that is a sexual assault. And so, and by touches you, I mean that includes anything sexual contact that could ever occur, is what I'm referring to. So the way this played out in my childhood was that and I should pause for a moment here to say this video does have a trigger warning on it. I should have said that already at the beginning. It does have a trigger warning on it. And anytime at all, while viewing this video, I strongly recommend having a grounding tool. I'm holding my grounding tool, which is one of my holy stones. And I'm saying that if at any time you feel that you're being triggered by my video and by this discussion, please immediately shut off the video, go into your highest best self-care for the remainder of the day. Please notice what comes up for you and give yourself the most wonderful, exquisite, beautiful self-care for the remainder of the day. Just notice what comes up for you and then honor those feelings and take beautiful care of yourself and give yourself that support that you need. So, all right, so I will continue. So I last in part one of this video, which was a couple days ago, I had a little trouble getting back to a time when I had time to devote to doing this. So I did pull up that same article. It's from the Institute of Family Studies, and you can find them at ifstudies.org. And the article, I just put it in a search for the effects of early childhood pornography exposure on children. And what comes up right away when you put in that search is what the article is entitled, "What Happens When Children Are Exposed to Pornography?" And I just skimmed the article last time, but this time I'm just going to read it. It's by Gabriella Coca and Jocelyn Wickel. And it's from April 30th, 2024. So this is a fairly fresh article. Most of us probably have, this is the beginning of the article. Most of us probably have people in our lives who struggle with an addiction of some kind, whether it be to smoking, using drugs, gambling, or other vices. An addiction develops when changes in the brain and body cause a person to feel compelled to continue using a substance or partaking in an activity, even when doing so may cause harm. I will also pause here to say that it's significant to mention that in a situation like this, in adulthood, a person could promise their partner or their spouse, I will not engage in pornography use anymore. I'm in a committed relationship with you. Your feelings on it are that you feel that it is intolerable in a relationship, and if I want to stay in the relationship and I know that about you, I'm going to make a commitment to no longer use that. And what I found out was in 1985, I was told that part of my life is over. I'm not doing that anymore because you've requested that I stop. And what ended up happening is I found out much, much, much later on. I was told, yeah, I've been doing this for the past 40 years. I just kept it secret from you. And I think that there are millions of adults in the world who feel the sting of betrayal in their relationship. And betrayal trauma is an absolutely brutal form of trauma. It can lead to something that I don't think it's a diagnosable condition, but there's a lot of mental health practitioners that refer to it as betrayal syndrome, meaning becoming depressed, becoming hypervigilant, becoming fixated on rumination of the ways that you were betrayed and feeling that you can't get it resolved, feeling anger, possibly acting out some, if you're still in the relationship, some reactive abuse. And I'm never condoning abuse, but I do understand the concept of reactive abuse, and that many, many, many abuse and trauma survivors engage in reactive abuse because it's part of the changes that have happened to their amygdala and their hippocampus and parts within their limbic system in their brain. Changes get made to the structures of our brains from certain types of trauma. Well, actually from virtually all types of trauma, but betrayal trauma seems to be something that can be particularly, how should I say it, challenging for people to recover from. And I'm not saying that they can't. We absolutely can recover from betrayal trauma. But when someone promises you something that is it's almost like a covenant between two people who are in a marriage or a committed relationship. And then you find out that not just for a little while, but for actually even longer than the committed relationship has taken place, or for the duration of that relationship, that they were just hiding from you. They were just saying what you wanted to hear so that they wouldn't have to deal with the negative consequences of having their partner being upset, triggered, angry, possibly feeling rage, and prone, possibly, can't say for sure, but possibly prone to engaging in reactive abuse, because our brain would perceive that as abuse. No doubt about it. If a person is engaging in a behavior that they have told you, if you discuss it and you say, your behavior is harmful to me, your behavior causes all kinds of chaos inside of me, and you've agreed not to do it, and we can move forward in the relationship, and I can forgive you for what you've concealed from me if you promise not to do that to me again, and I'm able to trust you and recover enough to go forward in the relationship. And then when you find out that that was all just false, so that they didn't want to lose you in the relationship, and so they will lie and say whatever they have to say in order to trick you and your brain, your nervous system, so that you will feel safe falsely, and then they're just doing it anyways. And then you find out years later, and many people don't find out years later, but I was a person who did. I just one day asked. I said, I have seen lots of things that make me think that's still happening, and I'm confronting you about it. And it took me almost 3 weeks to get an accurate answer. And I was asking probably like every other day or every third day, could we please talk about this? And I kept on getting the made up everything that ranged from it's gone on 3 to 5 years, pick a number, was one response that I got when I asked, how long? Just tell me how long this has been going on. How long have you been engaging in this behavior after telling me for years and years? No, I don't. I gave that up a long time ago. And every once in a while, every few years or so, I might say, I'm getting a feeling that never really went away. And they're like, no, I promise you, I wouldn't lie to you. No, I don't engage in that behavior anymore. I'm like, okay. And then when I finally confronted and said, look, just tell me the truth. How long has this gone on? And the response that I received was 40 years. And they did not have a problem with that. They didn't think there was anything wrong with it. They showed absolutely no discomfort at all about having been in a state of deception with their partner for 40 years. And so, it is betrayal, no doubt about it. And some of you might be saying, well, if you're not in relationship with that person presently, why does this bother you? And my answer is, I'm looking at it from a mental health and trauma perspective. And I use myself as a case study for the videos that I make. And I do that because I'm the only person that I can truthfully and accurately speak about in this much detail without betraying. I can't use a client ever as a case study in a video like this, unless it was something that was being discussed in a clinical setting only, not open to the public. And it was the person had signed disclosure forms where they're giving me permission to use this for a very specific purpose with educators and students only. and all of the names and demographics and everything would be changed anyways for something like that. But I'm free to use myself as a case study as much as I want to. And so that's why I speak about it. So, but let's get back to the article now. Okay, so here we go back into the article. It says most of us have okay, I'm going to read the beginning over again. It was just only a few lines. So most of us have probably have people in our lives who struggle with an addiction of some kind, whether it be to smoking, using drugs, gambling, or other vices. I will pause here to say that in my relationship only, smoking, using drugs, and other vices were most definitely present. Okay, so I'll continue. An addiction develops when changes in the brain and body cause a person to feel, and this is quotes, feel compelled to continue using a substance or partaking in an activity, even when doing so may cause harm. So if it's a chemical addiction, we refer to that as chemical addiction. If it's an addiction to a behavior, we refer to that as a process addiction. And I noticed over the years that my partner had multiple chemical and process addictions. These substances or behaviors activate motivation and reward regions in the brain, resulting in an altered dopamine system. The thing about addiction is that oftentimes the younger a person is when they are first exposed, the higher their risk for developing a serious addiction that can dominate minds and bodies, numbing them to the environment around them. Again, I'm going to pause and say, my spouse had his first alcoholic beverage experience at age 6. A party ended at his parents' house, and it was the 1970s, or it was 1970, the year 1970. And they were very prone to having card parties and summer holiday parties, Labor Day, Memorial Day, 4th of July parties. And there was always alcohol, free-flowing alcohol all over the place at these parties. And the house was actually designed to be used for parties. And I can get into that another time, but it was just set up that way. They planned the architecture of the house for having parties. And one of the things that happens in this story, okay, is my spouse revealed to me that I said, what age was the first time you were drunk? He said, oh, I think about 6 years old. And I said, what? How could you have been drunk at 6 years old? And he said, well, a party was ending in our house. And you know how the adults, and they're all kind of, back then, he said people would be drinking Manhattans and, you know, whatever they wanted. You know, somebody might be drinking scotch and water. Somebody might be drinking highballs. But what they're doing is staying for several hours and then getting in cars and driving away. And nobody was ever told you're not going anywhere. You have to stay here overnight because we're not letting you drive. It just back in that era, that was highly unusual. But he said that there were cups, those plastic cups on the tables. And he went around to the cups and just drank what was left in the bottom of each one. And he said it made his legs wobbly and he felt woozy. And the next day he had a headache. So their child was essentially hungover at age 6 years old. And he said it made him dizzy and feel weird, but he liked it. That was exactly how he put it to me. It felt dizzy and weird, but I liked it. And so I'll get back into this now. This reality creates a strong motivation for parents, grandparents, schools, and lawmakers to focus on protecting children by preventing or delaying exposure to harmful substances and behaviors until their brains are more fully formed and their risk for developing dependencies is lessened. So highlights are listed here. There are 3 highlights. Pornography is killing social interaction and the craving for personal connection that all humans have. Number 2 is one study found that only 50% of children reached out to someone after exposure to pornography, leaving many youth to grapple with the experience alone. And number 3 is children's brains are not equipped to process the adult experiences depicted in pornography. Same way a child's brain at 9 years old, that child's brain is literally not capable of understanding all of the emotional and psychological, behavioral, relational after effects of having sexual activity. They cannot, for lack of a better word, see around corners and see through walls. They just can't see what the after effect of something that they're engaging in could possibly be. Same way that, let's say, for instance, if a young children, let's say they're 8 and 10 years old, and they figure out the mechanics of sexual intercourse, and they're having sexual intercourse, and one of the two children, obviously female, and becomes pregnant at, let's say, 9 years old, she becomes pregnant. Okay, so it's like an 8 and 10-year-old, or a 9 and 10-year-old, whatever, right around there. But early on, at the very beginning of her menses. And girls, we know now, are menstruating much earlier than when I was an adolescent. It wasn't unusual for that to take place someplace between your 7th grade and 10th grade year in high school. And now is much younger. Many girls in elementary school are experiencing their first menses. And so let's say, for instance, that a 9 and a 10-year-old are having intercourse because they've had exposure to pornography and they want to try what they saw, and the girl becomes pregnant. There is virtually 0% possibility that that child can understand the full repercussions of what has taken place. Is that child able to handle the responsibilities, or even just the physical changes that would happen to her from a pregnancy? No. And a 9-year-old's body is not designed to be able to bring a pregnancy to full term and deliver a baby, and then have that child be mature enough to take care of that baby. It's impossible. And so this develops a whole new situation where children obviously would try to do what they've seen, test it out, check and see, are my parts able to do what I saw in that picture or on that video? And so it is something that it does present a very challenging problem. So one addiction that is becoming more normalized is viewing pornography, defined as sexually explicit videos, images, or writing. And please remember that pornographic writing is included in this, and it does exist. And if you don't understand that, you can find massive amounts of it on Amazon. And I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked when I got my Kindle Unlimited account, how readily available it would be under the category of written pornography. No images at all, but it is very, very explicit sexual material in written books. And I actually downloaded one of those books to read, and thought it was something, and it wasn't what I thought it was, and it was gross, and I found it to be absolutely disturbing because it did involve children. And I don't know how they're getting away with that, but that's for a different discussion. So sexually explicit videos, images, or writing with the intent to cause sexual arousal in its viewers. Creating pornography is a huge billion-dollar industry. This is troubling because pornography is increasingly impacting children and youth in negative ways. With technology and the internet as a crucial and necessary part of life, pornography has never been more easily accessible to children. 93% of boys and 63% of girls report being exposed to internet pornography before the age of 18, with the average of first exposure being 12 years old. Today's children are growing up in a sexualized cultural environment. As adolescents mature, it is natural that they search for information that they do not know. This includes searching for information about dating and sexual relationships, which may often lead to pornography. Thus, it is important to understand the ramifications when exposure to pornography starts at a young age. So here's a subheading called Consequences Among Youth. Pornography proves to be especially detrimental to children and adolescents. According to many researchers, early exposure to pornography is connected to negative developmental outcomes, including a greater acceptance of sexual harassment, sexual activity at an early age. And for me, I'll pause here for a second and say, I knew that my boyfriend had had girlfriend after girlfriend after girlfriend after girlfriend before me since the beginning of middle school, which was 6th grade. And so what was happening is the children, and this was happening with me too. Children, they develop a crush on somebody and they ask the inevitable question, will you go out with me? And if they get a yes, that means they walk together, they hold hands, they pass notes, and they might call each other on the phone, but that's as far as it goes. And it's dating practice. And he was doing that with lots of girls. Like as soon as one broke up with him, within the same day or within a couple of days, he'd have a different girl that agreed to be his girlfriend. And I asked him, what were you doing with these girls? Not because I'm jealous, but because I was starting to put together the bigger picture as a grown adult who's no longer a traumatized little girl. And I'm looking at this relationship of ours and thinking, how many girls before me were experiencing being essentially molested at school after being told no, and then he would do it anyways. And I wanted to know, is there a whole string of girls that were before me that broke up with you because they said no and you wouldn't accept no? Because that to me is the most natural thing that a boy or girl would do when somebody says, I'm not being touched that way, and they say, yes, you are. And if you say no, they might wait 5 minutes or 3 minutes or 40 seconds, and then they just try to do it again. And a lot of kids would find that intolerable and would say, bye. In older adolescents, what they would say is obviously lose my number. Don't contact me ever again. Then they would block you from their phone and stuff like that. But we didn't have that then. It was just, I'm breaking up with you. You are no longer my boyfriend, or you are no longer my girlfriend, and I'm done with you. And then it would just be either we're back to being just friends, or we don't talk anymore. And there's just going to be forever going to be weirdness between us because we both know what happened in a private moment. So I'll continue here. According to many researchers, early exposure to pornography is connected to negative developmental outcomes, including greater acceptance of sexual harassment, sexual activity at an early age, acceptance of negative attitudes to women, unrealistic expectations, and that we'll stick a pin in that because that was a huge part of what I was noticing, which should have been a huge red flag to me, but it wasn't, because I didn't understand that there was a heavy pornography component in what was happening with me. So unrealistic expectations, skewed attitudes of gender roles, greater levels of body dissatisfaction, rape myths, and in parentheses it says responsibility for sexual assault to a female victim, and sexual aggression. Okay, so in this list, I was experiencing sexual harassment, sexual activity at an early age, acceptance of negative attitudes to women, unrealistic expectations, skewed attitudes of gender roles, and greater levels of body dissatisfaction and sexual aggression. All of those things, except for the rape myths, were something that I have awareness that was these were factors for sure. Children's brains are not equipped to process the adult experiences depicted. Early exposure to pornography also increases the likelihood that depression and relationship problems develop. I cannot stress to you how much that final sentence is a huge part of what we're talking about here. Early exposure to pornography also increases the likelihood that depression and relationship problems develop. I've seen firsthand that is 100% true. Sexual risk-taking is another, excuse me, just lost my page for a moment. Sexual risk-taking is another common problem associated with being exposed to pornography at an early age. This includes more sexual partners and not using birth control. I can tell you that when my boyfriend and I were having sexual intercourse, there was no birth control. And I could have given birth to a baby while I was 14 years old. It didn't happen, but there was no condoms, no birth control involved in this until we were 15 years old. And so that was a huge, huge possibility of, that was just giant risk taking. This includes more sexual partners and not using birth control. As Gustavo Mesh found in 2009 study, adolescents who use pornography appear less socially integrated and more socially marginal. They express less commitment to their families, fewer pro-social attitudes, and less attachment to school. Truancy was an issue. Inability to stay inside of a classroom, instead wandering the halls with a manufactured hall pass. Lots of things that were disconnect from school, and absolute unwillingness to do homework, extorting other students to be able to have their homework so that he could copy it, hand it back, and then go to his class and appear to be prepared when he didn't do the work. He only just stole from other kids. This could be the case simply because you are so enveloped in what they are viewing and how they feel about it that they lose touch with their environment and the people around them. I would even go so far as to say that it has a tendency to create an entire inner fantasy world. It does cause disconnection from the rest of their social environment. So with family, with friends at school, and with the obligations that a kid would have in school, what I was seeing was somebody who was just barely skating by, and this person was of above average intelligence. So doing the work for school would have been absolutely very little problem for him. And but he wasn't interested in doing that. He was doing what pleased him. We see that with some children and adolescents, that they will only do what they have to do if there's a payoff for them that makes it worth their time. Excuse me. Another key issue is that an individual's first exposure and general exposure to pornography may lead to mental health problems such as depression and anxiety, particularly among adolescents, and that the earlier a child was exposed, the more mental health problems they face later in life. This individual has been struggling with depression and anxiety and panic disorder for years. They said that the panic disorder started at around 6 years old, like going to bed, laying down to go to sleep, and just absolutely unable to not just stay in the bed, but stay in their room. And they did describe something which we refer to as FOMO, fear of missing out. So if they could hear that the parents were laughing and watching the Tonight Show and laughing at Johnny Carson's jokes, that was too much stimuli, and the person was unable to stay in their bed. They had to come out and watch that, but it was also used as a relief for the panic attack that was starting. So there's a heavy association between late night television and staying up all night watching TV for this individual as the remedy for the panic, the night panics and really severe anxiety attacks. And then later in life, noticeable needing treatment, depression. Researchers also concluded that the earlier one is exposed to pornography, the more likely they are to have problems in their future sexual and romantic relationships. This may be because pornography tends to be a solo activity, secluding one from people, thus affecting how one interacts with those around them. In a study published in the Child Abuse Review in 2009, Michael Flood also found that pornography exposure can lead to emotional disturbance that may affect the way they interact with others and view sexuality in general. According to Mesh, adolescents who view pornography appear less socially integrated and more socially marginal. They express less commitment to their families, fewer pro-social attitudes. I know I read this already, but this is really important. They express less commitment to their families, fewer pro-social attitudes, and less attachment to school. In a study in the Journal of Pediatric Healthcare, Gail Horner reported that children less than 7 or 8 years of age have difficulty differentiating between what is happening on screen and what is happening in real life. This can lead to problematic sexualized behaviors, or PBS, problematic sexualized behaviors, or PBS. PBS has been linked to negative behaviors such as negative impulse problems, which can further affect the ability to interact with others, to get up and walk away from a group that's focused on something, a group activity in school. I saw this individual just wander off, just go off on their own and not care that no one was allowed to do that at that time. Lots of impulsivity, or I want to touch you there, or I'm going to say something to you that's completely inappropriate, and I don't seem to have any filter on my mouth. I just do this, and you're supposed to accept it. And you're not supposed to think there's anything wrong with it. You're never supposed to call me out on it. And I don't tolerate being corrected. Not only that, but PBS can greatly affect the way one perceives their life, making it much more difficult for someone to perceive what is real and not real. Pornography is killing social interaction and the craving for personal connection that all humans have. It puts a false reality into the minds of those who view it, and it makes them perceive life in a darker and more selfish way. Pornography use among youth also has been found to affect academic performance and mental health in adulthood. As one 2021 study found, this could be because sexual stimuli trigger sexual arousal, subsequently also short-term needs of sexual gratification, thus discouraging engagement in activities with long-term goals such as studying. These theories that thus suggest that the arousal that comes from using pornographic internet content may impede academically oriented activities and may consequently impair academic performance. Solutions. There are many ways that parents and policymakers can better protect youth from pornography use. First, media producers and distributors must be held accountable. Media has played an outsized role in shaping how young people view their sexuality, especially because it gives them access to sexual information. Because of this, it is extremely important for media producers and distributors to be responsible for limiting and blocking online sexual content for youth. Young computer users often receive unsolicited emails with sexual content, pop-up messages that take them to websites with sexual content, and sometimes youth report that they were brought to another sex site after trying to exit the existing site. Even when content notices warn that you must be 18 or older to continue, children often lie about their age to gain access to pornographic sites. Thus, users could be required to provide verification of their adult status, whether it be something like a driver's license number or a credit card number, which of course, parents are sleeping, They might have absolutely no problem getting a hold of those things, just going to that out of somebody's wallet for a few minutes and put it back. That absolutely must be happening already. I would believe that any sites that are already using that safety feature, there's ways to get around it, obviously. Parents and teachers play a key role in helping protect youth from early exposure to pornography. Placing filtering software on devices and having more parental supervision when minors are using screens of any kind can greatly help prevent pornography exposure. Parents can play either an active or restrictive mediating role in online pornography use for minors. Being engaged and active in children's computer use may change minors' perspectives on media content, particularly pornography. Parents can make effort to limit and block online sexual content by utilizing filtering software. Importantly, parents can delay the use of smartphones by teens until age 16 and can monitor and restrict content accessed through phones. These precautions can also be set forth in school settings, ensuring that school computers have more strict filters, including filters on pop-ups, and that school staff are aware of what minors are accessing online. Restrictions can be placed on computers that children have access to both in school and at home. Educating children and youth about the harms of pornography is also key. Such education could teach children how to react when they see pornography and who they can turn to for guidance and counsel. One study found that only 50% of children reached out to someone after exposure to pornography, leaving many youth to grapple with the experience alone. Research supports the importance of parent communication and framing when it comes to understanding sex. Thus, parents and teachers should be supported in teaching youth about the negative effects of pornography and pointing them to accurate and appropriate resources that will help them. So here's the conclusion. It is essential that we do more to collectively protect our children from the negative effects of pornography on their lives. Pornography exposure, especially at young ages, not only harms children in the short term, but can develop into an addiction that can interfere with long-term healthy development. Parents and mentors need to step up and educate minors about these risks. Public policy can be a source of support to protect youth by ensuring that children have little to no access to sexually explicit material online. So Gabriella Coca is a Wheatley Scholar and specializes in providing research to policymakers working on issues relevant to families and children. Jocelyn Wilkie is an assistant professor of family studies in the School of Family Life at Brigham Young University. Her research focuses on the causes and consequences of resource investments in children. She seeks to provide support for families navigating challenges in daily life. So I'm going to wrap this episode, this part 2 of this episode up in just a moment. But now we can see just from this one article, and there are many more like it, that when you see those parallels of a person had significant regular exposure multiple times to pornography in childhood or really early adolescence. And in the case that I'm speaking about, the person that was my partner, they claim that the exposure to pornography began at age 9. There could also be, the person is prone to hiding information and distort information. And a person who is grappling with this issue might feel a certain amount of shame about saying, actually, I've been exposed to this from the time I was extremely small. I know that this was in my house and I know that I was seeing it. They might be afraid of what another person's response would be if they found that out, because that would be something that would be so shaming and embarrassing. And it could be shaming and embarrassing, not just for the person who experienced the really early onset of pornography use in their home environment, or in a school environment, or even, as we know, in some places, it can even be happening in a church environment. Lots of different places where children could be someone who is nefarious, who is using that for, for certain parts of sexual abuse. But we know that a person could have such shame and embarrassment about the accurate age that it started, that they might just pick a number that they think you'll be able to handle and say, yeah, I was 8 or 9 or 10 when that happened. Or they could also have been highly traumatized by the actual pornography, because they are, after all, children. And I have read articles where it explicitly says that it is a form of trauma. If you were a child, let's say 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, and you were exposed to pornography, whatever form of pornography it was, you would have been traumatized, that would be considered to be a developmental trauma. It could also be a shock trauma. But if a person is exposed to significant trauma at a young enough age, any age actually, the brain has these override circuits in it, for lack of better wording for it. But our limbic system is incredible at taking traumatizing memories and burying them, and making it so that we don't have clear conscious memory of them. We might have just foggy rudimentary memory of it, or we could have no memory of it at all. But our brain has 2 jobs: to keep us alive and keep us safe. And in a situation where something felt so unsafe that we're looking at, and it was just totally disturbing to us, our brain could override that and put that in a memory bank area where we wouldn't be able to consciously pull up that memory. And then we might, at, let's say, for instance, 30 years old or 50 years old, might just go, oh, we might be just driving or watching television, or some little thing in the world could happen to trigger that memory. And then that memory that is part of what happened to me. My memories of what happened to me started to come back to me in my late 40s and early 50s. And by the middle of the decade of being in my 50s, I was coming right out and saying, you were telling me you didn't want to marry me. You gave me an engagement ring, but you were saying to me, I don't want to marry you for at least 10 years. And I am right now, this moment, very aware that you were telling me 2 separate things. I want to marry you, and no, I do not want to marry you. I just want to tag you like a Christmas tree in upstate New York. We can tag a Christmas tree in the summertime and then come back in December and cut it down. As long as you put a deposit on it or prepay it, you can tag a tree. And it's a common expression. Oh yeah, we tagged a tree in the summertime. We're going back to get it, in the late fall or early winter for Christmas. I refer to that with human beings as when they put a ring on your finger, but they don't want to marry you. They know that they just further on down the road, years later. In my case, a decade later was when that person said, that's when I want to have the marriage with you. It was a decade from the time I gave you the ring. And I buried that because that was traumatic for me. My brain didn't know what to make of that, because I had only known about engagement. Like if somebody that I knew, and it happened very rarely, they might be with somebody and wearing an engagement ring for 5 years. That was very unusual. But 10 years was unheard of. But we can store things in our memory in a place where we don't have conscious memory of it. Our brain does that because our brains are brilliant. Your brain is brilliant. It knows everything. And it can protect you by taking information and putting it in a safe space. And that way you are not going to live your life traumatized day in and day out by the knowledge that that thing was something you saw, something you experienced, something you witnessed, something you were involved in. Our brains do protect us. And so I think that a person might not even have a clear memory of exactly how early their childhood pornography use began, because it depends on how much that brain could handle at that age. So a person could have conscious memory of, yeah, this started around age 9, I think, but it might have been a whole lot earlier. So I hope that this discussion helped you. I could speak all day long about what happens inside of a human being when we experience trauma. And I should say, when we experience a traumatic event, a traumatizing event. The trauma itself is the remaining after effects that are inside of us. Trauma is always stored in the body. But it's possible that, the individual that I was in a relationship with for such a long time that had chemical addictions, alcohol, drug, and alcohol and prescription medication mixing addiction, multiple layers of chemical addictions, behavioral addictions. So, professionally, a person would say they had chemical addictions and they had process addictions. But this article says that people who have early exposure to pornography statistically have higher rate of incidence of having those forms of addictions throughout their lives. It does weigh in as a factor. And that's not to say that all people with process and chemical addictions had early childhood or childhood pornography use issues. No, I'm not saying that at all. And no one would ever rationally conclude that. But the article, just one article that I read to you today, does support the concept of the reality that they do statistically have higher rate of incidence. You can correlate a person who has early childhood or childhood pornography exposure or use to an adult human being who is going to have a higher incidence of anxiety and depression and substance and process addiction issues. So there's a lot to be said about that. There's a lot more information out in the world about it. But if you've known somebody or you yourself have had the incidents, the experience of early childhood pornography exposure or childhood or early adolescence childhood exposure to pornography, it could be a link between other mental health issues and behavioral issues that you've experienced. So I hope that this information was helpful for you. Please, please, please use the remainder of the day to take the very best care of your system and your system's needs, because processing this is not an easy thing for most people. So be kind and gentle to yourself. If you're interested in working with me as your certified trauma recovery coach, I would love to work with you. You can find me at linbouthillier.com. You can find me by calling my number, 716-994-3052. You can call me and set up. I'll look at my calendar. You can look at yours and we'll figure out when is the best time for us to spend about an hour together having a discovery call. I do charge a nominal fee for a discovery call because I am working during that time. But I charge $24.50 for a discovery call. And I don't hang up until all of your questions have been satisfied, appropriately for you. And if you like my channel, I would love it if you would hit the like button for this video, to share, to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and please put questions and comments in the comments section, because I love to interact with my viewers and subscribers. And without you, I would not be able to have just hit the 1,000 subscriber mark this week, which was a huge milestone for me. And from deepest part of my heart, I have so much gratitude for all of you who are helping to make that happen. So I'm over my flu now. I can talk without coughing. And so you'll be seeing more videos in the feed from Lin Bouthillier. So I hope all of you have the very best day. Remember, you can contact me through my website at Lin Bouthillier, or you can call me on the phone and set up your discovery call and see if I'm the right fit for you to work with you on your trauma. I would love to be your partner in trauma recovery. So have the very best day, everyone. I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye. Oh, remember, self-care is never selfish, and you are infinitely worthy of your own trauma recovery. Take care.